purpose of the Cultivating Your Practice worksheet is multifold. On the side that has the same direction, then the wall, and then the opposite direction, it is meant as an assessment of your skill set. And the other side is meant as what you want to do with the things that you are assessing. Now, I recommend that people take the worksheet and make copies of it rather than using, the one and only copy of it they may have, because this is the sort of thing that you can continually update. You can use the assessment worksheet in multiple ways. You can look at it in terms of what moves. When I originally designed this, this was designed for beginners who were trying, and I mean beginners, like maybe advanced beginners, who were trying to assess how they were going to move to the next level in their practice. But you can't know how to go where you're going if you're not sure where you are, especially if you're trying to make a plan. In the beginning, the idea was taking a look at everything you know in those directions. Now, because this was for beginners, and I mean beginners, that's why I only have 5 slots in each of the different directions. You'll also notice it lacks on the worksheet a horizontal plane, which in the beginner context makes a lot of sense until you start getting more toward advanced stuff where you're doing plane breaking and cool stuff. It's less relevant because most of what we spin, that I've seen at least over the last decades, is in the vertical planes, either front, back, or sides. The idea is to see what you have and see where you have deficiencies. The first part on the top is the same direction matrix. This correlates to the yellow postcard, and the bottom part correlates to the green postcard. What we didn't discuss on the postcard was the idea that it is a postcard. If you take the 2 images, the yellow one and the green one, and you collapse them on top of each other and you fold them in where it says the wall on both of them, you can imagine that the wall is the way you flip from one side of the card to the other side of the card, or on the worksheet, how you go from the same direction matrix to the opposite direction matrix. I consider it the wall. It's just a metaphor. It's not, it's there is no wall. So the wall is the way. It is the thing that blocks you from being. It's the thing that separates the two. On the one hand, you could look at the wall as it's just a boundary. These are same direction things. These are opposite direction things. In another way, you can look at it as the wall is the dividing place, and it's the means by which, like how you navigate the wall is how you get from same direction to opposite direction, right? So you can plane bend, you can toss, you can stall, you can spiral, you can tap back, all these different ways. You can stop the poi, all of these different ways that you can go from A to B or B to A. The wall, you can go, I use it as a concept because you can go over it, through it, under it. In real life, that's what you would do with a wall. You'd either go over, go through, or go under, or go around. Going around to me is sort of like, I'm going to just stop my poi and start again. But the rest of them are techniques that are more in flow. Although you can use a stop as very much in flow, particularly if you dance and there's some break in the music where it comes to some hot stop and you stop your poi and then you start again in the opposite matrix. Well, you could, and in addition to doing something where you stop both poi, and then I messed up with my left hand, and I just left my hand stopped until I turned and I went into something else. Even that, where only one hand is stopping, would still be a transition to go from a same direction to an opposite direction matrix. It all gets very muddy when you start looking at atomics, because are you in a same direction matrix or are you in an opposite direction matrix? It's not, I don't think it's as clear. Again, this was designed for beginners. You can certainly amplify your perspective on it to include more complex concepts as you gain them, but the basic idea remains the same. You assess what you have, and then based on what you've assessed, which is on side 1, we'll call it, of the worksheet, you create goals on side 2. Now, the first aspect of it is, for beginners, in my experience, most people have more same direction moves than opposite direction moves. It just seems to be how people learn, or at least in the old days, maybe not so much anymore. So, like weaves and pinwheels, most people learn pinwheel, say, in same direction and weave in same direction before they learn it in opposite direction. So there isn't very much that people have in the beginning in opposite direction, save maybe the butterflies. It just doesn't seem to be in the very beginning, what most people are learning from the old school basic move set. Maybe you have some hip reels, maybe you have some pin reels, but it's not, it's not, there's not a lot going on. Now, when you start doing things like when flowers came onto the scene, that evened it out somewhat, but a lot of people start in the same direction and don't start in opposite direction, even though opposite direction can be easier because it feels more balanced because you don't have hands fall. Like even in opposite direction, 4-petal or 2-petal flower, the arms are moving in the same timing in general when you execute those moves, which can be easier for some people. Normally, when people think of a 3-beat weave, they think of the 3-beat weave as a split time move. However, you can do it in together time, which is what I demonstrated in that video yesterday. And so when we start talking about moves in particular timings, that's just a particular way that you execute that style of move. To me, the style of move is like flower. There's a gazillion different ways, and everything else is the how you execute the concept. Direction, plane, timing. I don't see timing as being more important than direction. So if you're talking about a flower, it's a flower. There could be same direction flowers and there could be opposite direction flowers, but you can do same direction flowers in same time, and you can do them in split time, and you can do them in polyrhythmic time. So the timing to me is subordinate to direction in most cases. So the concept of the move is the master level from my perspective, and then where you do it, i.e. the plane, how you do it, i.e. the direction, and the timing that you use for it are all subordinate elements of the concept itself. So if you're starting with a weave, you can do a multi-beat weave, which is like a 5-beat, for example. Most people don't do 7 beats or 9 beats that I've seen, or even a 4-beat if you look at the corkscrew as a weave, which I do. And then it's, okay, plane, direction, timing. Because technically, if you have the skills, you could do a together time 5-beat weave in overhand or underhand. It's difficult, and it can be done. As with most things that are higher skill, they're difficult, and you just have to practice. All you do is practice. You have your same direction matrix, you have your opposite direction matrix, and you have your wall. Your wall is the way that you get between them. Now, if you notice that your same direction matrix, you could easily fill out 5 moves in each of the 4 directions, but in your opposite direction matrix, you've got only like 5 moves total. You realize at that point in time, you can see very clearly there's a deficiency, and it's a great way to focus. Now, if you're more advanced in your practice and you're well beyond beginner, the question is now not what can you do? The question is, where is your focus? So the purpose of the worksheet is no longer basic assessment of what's possible in your repertoire because you have such a limited repertoire. What's the focus now is, what am I working on in both the same and opposite direction matrices? Now that can be very varied. As you start going into the intermediate level, this is where you need to be talking about, I think, specific move type, plane, direction, and timing. Because you could say, oh, I'm working on flowers. Okay, well, there's only hundreds of those, if not thousands. So, and they can fit in either matrix. So which flower specifically are you working on? This becomes relevant when you start building combinations. Now, to me, other people's view of this may be different than my own, but my view of this is that you have moves themselves that once you start connecting together become sequences or combinations, which I would largely use in an interchangeable way. Now, the difference for me between a combo and a choreography is that a choreography is generally specifically to a piece of music and they're married together, although you can use the same choreography with multiple pieces of music. Generally, if you're really trying to articulate a song expressively, you want to have specific movements match the beat of the song, and that particular marriage to me is the difference between a choreography and a combo. A combo to me, or a sequence, is a set of moves that fit together. The expression of them, the timing, and the order, that is when it becomes a choreography, because it's matched to, oh, this is at 2 minutes and 42 seconds into the music when it does blah, blah, blah in the music. And that's intentional so that you are maximizing the visual impact of the auditory experience. That to me is the difference between the choreography and a combo/sequence. Once you fill out your worksheet to figure out what you're actually focused on, then there is the elements of the focus in terms of how you're focusing on it. Now, if you look at the other side of the worksheet, you'll see there's 3 columns. When I think of what you're working on, there's 3 discrete elements that can be combined together, and they are all unique individual things. First, there is the skill itself, so it's the actual execution. In looking at this worksheet, you can see my bias. The first column is play, and the play for me has always been the expression of it in flow, being able to move between the moves. So it's being able to connect the moves together. Whereas the practice is the execution of the move and being able to do it. You can see my bias that I want to be able to move between the moves more than I want to be focusing on new moves by the fact that I put that first in the worksheet. And then the performance is applying things like the 7-layer dip, being able to express it, being able to have musicality with it, being able to have height changes and have speed changes and be able to be in motion with it or jump over it or things like that. So all 3 of those things are different aspects. At the base of them, you need to have the skill. That is the practice. You need to grind, you need to get the skill to a certain level before you can actually express it in a flow, because if you don't know the move well enough, you can't connect it to other moves. So you can't really play with it until you have practiced it enough to get it. And you may not be able to really perform with it and have much expression with it until you've gotten it to a certain level. That said, for my part, I believe very strongly engaging with the performance aspect of it where you're practicing expressing it. And I do think of this systematically in terms of the 7-layer dip. The height, the size, the speed, the motion, the dramatic presence, all of that. I think once you apply that, which you can do while you're learning the technique, you will have more style. Thus, if you learn the technique with performance in mind, oh, how would I want to express this technique? Which is tough until you get to a certain point of at least having the technique at a gross level. If you do that, you can actually stylize your movements earlier in your engagement, and as a result, have more performance style when you start connecting it in flow, because you've already stylized it in your performance expression while you were in the grind of just practicing learning it. Now it's a high level game to choose to play. Oh yeah, let me think about how do I want to actually express that. You may not know, so it's a big ask. And that said, you can start playing with it anyway. Even if you don't know what the expression looks like, playing with how that is by exploring the 7-layer dips. And that was the purpose of the 7-layer dip. You have a systematic way of approaching how to consider expression of the move through those 7 layers. And you can start considering each of those things while grinding, so that later, when you're playing with it and connecting it to other moves, you suddenly have a much higher level of stylized execution. Because, as I like to say, anyone can do the weave, only you will do the weave like you, based on how you have chosen to perform it and stylize it. And I think, to me, that's where artistry arises, is when you're stylizing it. It's not in the iterative execution of the move, it's in the stylization and the way that it's an expression of you, yourself, and your energy.